Hello. So I will be talking about my transition into when I finally made my decision to not become a victim of molestation. Now, the time when it happened, I was about 10 years old. And the guy that did it, he was like 20, like 22. So when it happened, me being that young, I didn't know what to think. Like, I was just in shock. I knew what happened after it happened, but for during that time, I did tell someone, but after when I told that person, I was not heard. So then I shut down. So when I shut down, I then became, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was being tormented mentally, even as a child. I was just thinking, like, how could this happen? Like, did he feel some type of way afterwards? Like, so much stuff just ran through my mind. So, me being 10 years old and then moving up in age, I became more rebellious. I became more frisky. And then eventually I started dealing with drugs and things like that because that thought, that thing that happened to me, I never forgot it. It haunted me in my dreams. I can be in a relationship and something can be a trigger. And I didn't know all these things at the time, but I was reacting to something that was internalized. It was in me and I couldn't fight it. I couldn't hide from it. I couldn't, so I just said, you know what? I'm just going to, whatever I try that's going to help me get over this thing is what I'm going to just stick with. And that was alcohol for me. So while I was drinking, even as a teenager, and I started smoking marijuana in the process, but drinking was more my thing. It got me to a place where nothing mattered. Like, that thing did not hunt me. I could just be wild and loose and I have to worry about it. But the moment I became sober, it snuck up on me again. And I was just trying to get away from this thought. And it followed me for years. Like I said, I was 10 when it happened. And I started to do drugs and basically abuse drugs and alcohol. Throughout that transition, when I was 14 years old, I then became in the state's custody. So here I am, I've been molested. I experimented with sex after the fact. Because what I also forgot to mention, in the environment where I was from, after that happened to me, it's like I started to realize it was like a domino effect. It was other guys in the community that was also touching me inappropriately after that. And it just seemed like, because I heard other girls' stories, not at that time, but now I've heard other girls' stories that lived in that environment, and they told me the same story, that they were touched as well. So that was just that horrible thing that was happening in our community. And so before I went into DSS custody, I've already experimented I was molested, experimented with drugs and alcohol. I pretty much was broken. And now you're telling me that you're taking me away from people who I knew all my life. That was very heartbreaking for me. And so they put me, and let me back it up a little bit, because the reason why I got into DSS custody is because initially, when I was younger, during the time I got molested, I was living with my grandmother. So throughout that process, my grandmother, because my mom was on drugs, my mom she started using crack cocaine. And when that happened, then she gave us to my grandmother. And so on top of my grandmother having 3 of us, she also had other grandchildren that were coming to her home, and she only had a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home. So my grandmother had a lot on her hand, and she did the best that she could, I would say. So at some point, I think when I was like 11 or 12, my dad then came and got me and my sister. He came and got us. And so things were going good for a while with my father. I never told him about me being molested. And I don't think I told him about me having, experiments with the drug and alcohol abuse. No, I didn't. So I kept all that in, right? And so at some point, my father got married, and she had 3 other children herself. And it's just at some point, my dad got abusive. And I know, knowing what I know now, because at this time I was about like 13, 14. So knowing what I know now, I know that I had issues at that age that I couldn't express to my dad at the time. So I do remember certain behaviors that I was showing that was acting out. I wouldn't say all the time, but I know that I displayed certain type of behaviors that he probably didn't understand, because I never told him about my situation. But anyhow, it got to a point where my dad became abusive. So when he did do that, I felt singled out, because the way that he did his punishments with me, the way he whooped me or what have you, he didn't display that with the other children. I got the harshest punishment of them all. Of course he, was old school. He'll whoop me with a belt, but he will also make me take off all my clothes. And I heard people also tell me after, when I told them this story, and it was like, oh, that's a part of old school too, you take off your clothes. I was like, oh, okay. What he did, he made me take off everything, and then it was like a whooping spree. But after the whooping spree, I will be in the room by myself, and there were moments when he had me in a closet, and that was a part of my punishment as well. And so this went on for a very long time. This is just the way how he decided to discipline me, or whenever he kind of, because I wouldn't say every time I did something to deserve a whooping. It's just, I was picked out. At certain times, I just felt like this is the way that he might have expressed his anger, because being the fact that it was me and my sister and 3 other children from his wife at the time, I think it were situations where we bumped heads sometimes, and then there'd be a situation, and then it'll come back on me or something like that. But anywho, it got to a point where I reported him. And I remember being in school, and it was a video they were showing. And they said, well, if you ever been abused, to dial this number. And I don't think I told anybody. I didn't tell my teachers or anyone. But for somehow, I wrote down the number. And when he did it again, I dialed the number and I reported the situation, what was happening. And because he just did it not too long ago, I still had, like, it just happened a few days before I called. So I still had the bruises and everything on my body. So, you know, of course, the social worker get involved, and it's his story and it's my story. So going off of his prior, you know, because they look at his background and everything like that. My dad at the time, he was a drug dealer, and they looked at, you know, his information, his background and stuff, and they saw that information. And so I guess it was like a little, you know, they were, I wouldn't say judgment, but they were just trying to be careful, I guess, about the decision that they made dealing with, you know, because he was a felon as well, I think. So basically they moved me at the house. Given my situation and how I was treated and everything, they moved me at the home. And so when they did that, actually, I skipped over something. The main situation why they got involved, DSS, prior to me calling them, I did do something, and then he got upset. That's what happened. Me and my sister, we were left at a library. And so we were there, we were doing our homework or what have you, and then it was a CVS that was like close by. And so I went in there and I stole some hygiene items for me and my sister. And I knew I even had a perm hair, like doing hair back then was like my thing. So I bought some perm, I bought some soap, like I bought some like hygiene stuff for us. I put it in my book bag and I walked out with my sister, and I was in the clear. My sister, and I picked on her for a long time for this, but my sister was like, she wanted some press on nails. So I was like, okay. So I went back in there and I got these press on nails. When I got the press on nails and went back out the door, that's when I got called. So the guy was like, okay, we're gonna hold you here. We're gonna call the parent, I went through that process. So that's what they did. And then my dad came, and he was threatening me the whole time. And I knew I was about to get it. I already have gotten it, you know, times before. But this particular time, I knew, like, I was very, very fearful. I tried to explain it to him, but it just like wasn't, you know. So that's how that situation happened, basically. And when he did that, that was like my breaking point, and that's when I reported him. So to fast forward, when I reported him and everything, getting placed in custody. Oh my gosh. I was 14. I didn't know what I was walking into. I already been molested, experiment with drugs and alcohol. I would say by this time, the type of drugs that I experiment with, it was marijuana for sure. I was smoking cigarettes really bad then too. And I don't think, at 14, I wasn't doing like cocaine or anything like that. So it was just the alcohol, cigarettes, and the marijuana. I did pop some pills. Yeah, I did pop some pills. So when I was in custody, they sent me to a group home facility. I never heard of a group home. I didn't know what I was walking into. Also, I would say before I go into details about that, when I was in the community where I got molested, I also got touched by girls as well. So it wasn't just men that were touching me, it was women too. So go back to the group home situation. And that was a valuable point because in the group home, it was a girl that I met there. And, I just didn't know because it was probably like 4 girls, it was a all girls group home. It was like 4 girls at this particular group home. And this particular girl, for some reason I draw into her. Our situations were a lot similar. And we somehow developed a relationship. We started off as friends and then we started dealing with one another. And I think that had a lot to do with the prior I wouldn't even say comfortability, but the prior type of experience I had before, initially not by choice, but for somehow I guess like me and her becoming friends, and she had experience. I just somehow we became in a relationship. So after that, like me spending more time with the group home, the system altogether, I started to involve myself more into women, into drugs. I think I started experimenting with ecstasy and more downer type of pills as well, and marijuana, again, cigarettes and alcohol. And then now to also put in there, while I'm going through this process, I'm still trying to get in contact with my family. Like sometimes I would run from the group home. Actually, it got so bad that they placed me in lockdown facilities. So I stayed with that particular group home, I would say probably for about 2 years. Because I would run away. Because ultimately, I wanted to be with my family. Like, my mom was still in the streets on drugs, really, really bad. She was really bad. And my grandmother, because my mom had already had 2 more children. So it was me, my other sister that we had the same mother and father. Then was my oldest brother. And then it was 2 other ones my mother had. So even though I was in foster care, my grandmother still had, but my dad still had my sister, but I think she would still come and visit. But my grandmother had the other 3, and my brother was older than me, and he was in the streets. He was trying to, survive, and he started selling drugs, and he had to witness, not me, my sister, and my oldest brother. We did witness my mom on the streets, but he saw it the most. Because while I was in a group home, and while my sister was with my dad, my brother was in the streets. He was a drug dealer, and then I'm pretty sure he saw her, my mom. And so that hurt. That had to hurt to see your mom in that, situation, and people making their comments and stuff. But so so me basically being in the group home, dealing with all of this, trying to still get, see my family and stuff, they put me in lockdown facilities. Because you're supposed to be there at a certain time, and if you're not, then, and that's what happened. And so that right there was like torture for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like they held me there, and it's, and it got to the point that I started escaping the lockdown facilities. And then they put me into like this other one that was like something to do with a mental health facility. So they had the right to shoot you with a needle, and they did that so many times to me that they kicked me out that facility. And all of this anger, hurt, and frustration I had was only because in my mind, I am a child. I deserve to be with my family. What happened? I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for this. In my mind, I was just like, God, what did you do to me? Why me? Why am I in this situation? I remember at one time I was just like, I hate God. Like, because I didn't know no better. I just thought that this was going to like really take me out in such a way that I couldn't understand what was happening. Why me? And so as I got older, that followed me throughout my life. If anything, it got worse. Most definitely. The drinking, the drugs, because when I became of age, technically I wasn't of age. I was like probably 16 or 17 when I became a dancer. So I experimented with that. Then I started dealing with cocaine, ecstasy. Started going to other states, just going, and started still dealing with girls and women and being abused even more by men, and prostitution, and just broken. And now me being where I'm at in my life, I understand. I do. Because what I went through, it's not just for me to hold in. How can other people get healed? And not just that, but it's a healing process when you tell your story. And I had to learn throughout all this process how to forgive, how to love. I had to find my worth, because I wasn't taught that. But God, He showed it to me. He showed me patience. He showed me the meaning of true love through all of that I've been through. I know I witnessed people that been through what I've been through, and some of them had died. Some of them, they can't take it. I see them. I have witnessed them strung out and everything. And I decided to make a decision. Everything what I've been through is not going to take me out. It's not going to take me out. I said to myself, I want to be a voice. And how can I be that voice if I'm strung out, if I'm doing this or doing that? How can I be that voice? I got to lead by example. So let me get myself together. So I stopped drinking. I stopped smoking. It's been about 2 years now since I stopped drinking and smoking. I let go dancing and prostitution. And I can say that I feel so much better. Now, I'm not perfect. And these things do try to come back after the fact that you let it go. They try to sneak back, different people and different stuff. And but Christ told me that I'm a warrior. And I know what that means now. A fighter. When you think of warrior, They are ready to go. They got their breastplate, they got their shield, they got their everything, their sword. Like, they are ready for battle. And that's exactly where I'm at. So all my sisters and brothers out there who've been through a lot in their lives too, who's been molested, who's been neglected, who's been on drugs, who's been a stripper, who has just went through a lot in life. Let me tell you, there is healing. There is healing. There is. It's so much that I didn't even know that I'm learning now. God led me to people. He led me to people who can show me the healing process. You have your counselors, you have your advocates, you have your church family. Even if you don't have a church family, you can then get, because it's different sources out here that can help you, a community that will have meetings at different, locations that can talk to you about whether it's drug abuse or molestation, either or. You just have to be open to it. And I never was before. But when I became open to it, I started to find my power. I did. And I was so excited, I started recording my journey as I have it on my channel. And I'm just like, wow. And I started, after I finished each video, I'm like, how did I do that? Especially when I went to the house that I got molested at. And I was just like, talking to myself, like, girl, did you just do that? I'm like, yeah. And people, and I know some people would be like, what in the world, why? It's just something about taking back your power, taking that power back, It might not work for everyone. I'm not saying it's for everyone, but it did something for me. I also wrote a letter to the guy who molested me. That did something for me too. And I forgave him. I did. In my heart, my soul. And I even put that to the test. I was like, well, even if I saw this guy and he was in the streets and he was asking for money, what would you do? Would you run up to him and start, I'm to the point now, I said, I give him some change. I give him some money or whatever, you want some food or whatever. I wouldn't even mention what he did to me, because I turned it over to God. And now I realize what that deep love that God was talking about is all about. And it's not easy. It's not easy. But it's doable. It is. So, thanks for tuning in to my story. And like I mentioned, if you've been through any of these things, pray. Pray, ask God to, and He will lead you to these sources to help you. He will. He will help you on your journey to turn away from these things that's keeping you bound. Because that's where the enemy wants you. The enemy wants you on drugs, messed up, just a mess. But the enemy is a liar. You can get through this. We are more than conquerors. And you can get through this. In Jesus' name. Thank you, sisters, brothers in Christ. Be blessed.